For a drawing I didn't do. Mommy won't let me see it.
When we first started writing, we were like, all right, we're going to write it so it's so low budget that we'll be able to do it and no one will say no. And so everything was like no effects. Let's go, as soon as you're going back in time, it's going to be a straight cut, maybe a flash of white, and maybe it's just even more like startling, like what reality, everything like that. And as we progressed, and as this also became a studio film, and we started talking about it, like, everyone was like, well, yeah, you definitely need effects. And we thought more about it, and we're like, nah, it's going to enhance it. The effects are going to be better. And we just jumped right in.
When I was on set, I was trying to come up with some concepts, and I had Chris order some butterflies, and we were, I didn't want to do the normal, they come up with a butterfly effect. I thought, well, what in the heck is the butterfly effect? And so I started thinking about butterflies, and they're kind of almost 2D, they're kind of cutouts. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have depth, a lot of depth as you're moving through the frame for the directors, because this film's all about depth. It's all about psychology, and so when I was on set, I was looking at, they were doing some playback, and they were doing a brain scan, a CAT scan of Ashton's head. And there was a looped piece of footage playing back, and I thought, that looks like a butterfly to me. And it was, just kind of vibrating a little bit, and I thought, that'll work.
One of the big things that we try to do is really reference films that they're talking about, and go off of that. And quite often we'll take video cameras out and shoot our own material far, before anything ever happens in production. And the visual effects guys will run out there, and we'll get our own little plates and start working with and manipulating that footage so that we have a good idea of what we're going to be shooting on the set. The original concept that the directors had was that every little object in Evan's room, or wherever Evan was, every little object that he had would shimmer and shake independently from each other. So his books, the sheets on his bed, his posters, his computer, they would all shake independently from themselves as he was transitioning back into time. We did several shots with this effect. We applied that to several shots, and it just didn't lend itself, it didn't meet their expectations on screen. It was almost an idea that was a bit better served on paper than it was on screen. So we revisited that concept, and the directors finally phoned up Ralph one day and said, Ralph, just make everything shake, And so we let the artists just have at her, and we made everything shake, and the guys went pretty overboard, and they were unleashed, and they came up with some really creative stuff. And it was up to Ralph and the directors to kind of reel them in and make sure that the tone of the visual effects were consistent with the tone of the movie.
Never wanted to be in the movie anyway. It was close. My clothes, but it was
in this part of the story, Robin Hood has just married Maid Marian.
The directors were both writers and directors, so we got a kind of a global thought on the whole thing from them. And then I hit them with a lot of visuals. We immediately, as soon as we picked up the show, we got in there and we started just taking early visualizations and throwing them up in front of them and just trying to get feedback, because I needed to get online with them, kind of figure out where their heads were at. And we used that, and that really helped tie us in pretty quickly. Pre-visualization was the key in this one.
Right now, you fucking animals.
One of the early things that we R&D'd early on was the words dancing around the journals. And Ralph and I and a few other guys, we went out and shot some journals and some words, and we began the process of fleshing that out. But in the script it says, the words dance around the page, but how do they dance around the page? Does the entire line of words dance around the page? Do the words themselves dance around the page, or do the letters dance around the page, etc.? So that's where we began with this film, and we began far before we went to camera, probably a month or two beforehand.
There was a hate in his eyes that
Yeah, the guys at Toy Box, we were responsible for all of the memory flashes. Peter edited the sequences together, and then he gave us a rough cut, and at which point we took the ball and ran with it. And the initial feedback from the directors were that they wanted these sequences to be super saturated, to be really surreal, but to have the skin tones of everybody consistent and normal. So we did a lot of tests practically in the lab, and bleach bypass and whatnot, and just we were having problems keeping the skin tones of the actors consistent. So we had to resort to After Effects and make the entire sequences visual effects, and After Effects was used for a lot of the color correction and time remapping of the sequences, and we used a lot of After Effects on the show, and it was a great tool for us.
What the fuck, bro? Let me know! Keep him.
There's two important things to think about when we're talking about Evan waking up in bed without any arms, and that's the combination of the CG skin and blending that with Ashton's real skin. And the second thing that's really important about this shot is the motion of the camera.
The shot initially was just going to be Ashton sitting up into frame, and it was a little dry. There wasn't much drama there, and the directors weren't too hip on it. They wanted to push that envelope, and of course, this was a small film. It wasn't a big budget for MoCo or for any of the high-tech gear that we would normally bring in for that kind of thing. So I sat with Matt Leonetti and the two directors in the room, and we just bantered for a while, and we came up with this camera move that comes up off Ashton and pulls back and settles as he sits up into frame. And there were several problems with the shot, but having been an artist myself for years, I knew what we could get away with and what we couldn't. And so we were able to use that to get away with a shot that normally you wouldn't be able to pull off in this budget as well. That just you wouldn't know. I mean, the whole plate had to be rebuilt. We had shadows crossing pillows of his arm, I mean, his arm was really there, so we had to remove all that. And he had shadows that crossed the pillow, and the pillow, at one point his arm depresses the pillow, so that had to be fixed. The flesh, the matching of the flesh and everything was extremely well done. I'm still very proud of how they pulled that off. So we have all these little pieces that I'll know and the artists will know, and we'll all be staring at it going, wow, it works.
The first thing that we did to help blend the CG skin with Ashton's real skin is actually go out and take real pictures of Ashton's skin. So we took close-ups, stills of his skin, several shots, and then later on down the road we stitched those all together and provided texture for the 3D model, at which point that was applied to. And the other major key to this shot is the motion of the shot, and unfortunately the budget of this film didn't really lend itself to big setups and big rigs and motion controls and whatnot. So we had a fantastic camera operator in Dolly Group, and they accomplished what we needed to just simply with a dolly and a camera move, and they were able to repeat their moves constantly for us, and we needed several plates for this shot.
And I guess the tricky part of that shot was that we had to match him getting up and dollying back at the same speed, and we didn't use motion control, so we had to count either by osmosis or a stop clock, the dolly had to be pulled back just absolutely perfect. And but we pulled it off, and I think we did it within like a tenth or quarter of a second. So I think they were able to match up in the computer. Otherwise, it'd been a motion control shot, and that would have probably been a little more expensive than the way we did it.
What the fuck is this?
Ladies, stay back! Don't go near the mailbox!
Idiots!
I mean it when we get the hell back!
I'll save you, lady!
We had 3 of these mailboxes. They're expensive to build. And we weren't sure how it was. The directors wanted it to come apart, and there's all about how much packing you want and how much depth cord, and it can come apart in many different ways. And it's all about how much big of a fireball you want, and this whole thing. And this is supposed to be like a little bigger than an M100. It was like an M80. I used to blow up mailboxes with M80s, and that's like pop. But the directors wanted it, a little bigger than that. So we went and we did an explosion, and the explosion that we put in there was pretty big. And so then we did a rough comp. We put the AD's son in there and blew him up, and we showed that to the directors, and they thought that was great. And then obviously they sat on that for a day, right? They thought about it for a day, and the next thing I know, the next day, the explosion was twice as big, and it actually, when we actually shot the shot, the explosion was so big, it was beyond the camera point of view. So we had to reshoot it again. So now we're on our last mailbox, and it's getting dark. It's just one of those days, it was the end of the shoot day. We'd already lost one, and so we got it all back, got it together, exploded it. It's kind of interesting what we did. Because it was getting late and everything, we ended up isolating the mailbox and putting it into a hero shot that was shot earlier in the day. And then we, of course, had to dress up some of the sides of the mailbox and everything before it explodes. But yeah, so we got it on the last explosion and got away with it.
The last thing I remember before the blackout was holding my hands over Kaylee's ears. I think I was more focused on her hands on mine than the mailbox across the street.
When you're a writer-director and you're thinking these things through, and you're reading your script over and over again, and then you start to go, okay, well, I've seen this 100 times. I'm tired of this. If I'm, Joe Blow in the theater, I don't want to see this effect again. I want to see something new and fresh. So they obviously had a meeting earlier, and Matt came up with an idea of, instead of doing some more wiggly words or something like that, of doing this revolving shot where the whole room starts to transition and move. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, but I don't have motion control. I don't have, there was like all these I don't haves. So we came up with a solution for that. And it was a pretty good solution. We ended up doing a green screen behind Ashton on a dolly attached to the camera dolly, and it was all on one round track. And so the green screen was constantly behind him as it rotated, and we lit those with Kinoflows.
With lighting him, we couldn't put lights above. We didn't want lights on top. We wanted lights, I think we put the lights below him, and obviously couldn't see the lights. I didn't want a lot of top light on him at the time. So, and keeping that light off of him, keeping that light on him, I think we had to take a couple of dimmers and dim one light out, dim one light on as we went around. So we had to kind of time that so we didn't get flares, and the speed of the dolly was critical, that we made it pretty much the same speed and when we did the room and when we did him. So that was a tricky one.
Well, effects are always there to support the plot, And my hope is that it isn't overbearing, and that it does. I mean, the directors, right from the beginning, it was a global thought. They thought about everything. I mean, everything had its place, and it was well thought out. It wasn't an effect just because they wanted an effect. It was there for a reason, and it was there to strike a chord in the theater gore, and hopefully it'll do that.